It's termite season.
Hi, it's me.
And bugs fear the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control.
Go blue at Essential Pest Control. We'll eliminate those bugs, bees, and termites. And stop paying too much to that national provider. Buy local for great service and affordable rates. Call Essential Pest Control because termites fear the blue.
Run for your life.
Call for the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control. 886-3029. That's 886-3029. Or check online at essentialpest.com.
This is Eb Wilkinson with Wilkinson Wealth Management, where we manage money for gun owners. What does it mean to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired? It means designing a plan that allows you to do the things you want to do, outpace inflation, and never run out of money in your lifetime. If you want to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired, call me, Eb Wilkinson, at 777-1911. That's 777-1911 or WilkinsonWealthMGMT.com.
I'm proud to welcome my good friends at Tucson Iron and Metal Retail to Inside Track as an advertiser. Jamie Kipper and her staff are conservation experts. They sell round and square steel tubing, metal plate and roofing materials, as well as new and used steel, aluminum, and stainless steel to ranchers, artists, interior designers, roofers, as well as you do-it-yourselfers out there. Tucson Iron and Metal Retail is open Monday through Fridays, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 8 a.m. to noon. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail, 701 East 36th Street. Call 520-209-1576. That's 520-209-1576, or go to TucsonIronRetail.com. Come by and be sure to ask for Jamie. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail. This is what conservation and repurposing is all about.
Welcome to Inside Track with Bruce Ash and Ed Wilkinson on the Live the Dream Media Network.
Welcome to episode 22 of Inside Track. Bruce Ash coming to you live today from the Live the Dream Media Studios in Marana, Arizona. We have another action-packed Big Wednesday show for you today on Inside Track. Eb is on assignment today. He will return next week. Got a little bit of a late start today. Joining us directly is author Ryan L. Cole. And as we begin our celebration of the 250th anniversary of our great nation's birth, today we'll be talking about all things Lafayette. Ryan has just completed a new book, The Last Adieu, Lafayette's Triumphant Return, the Echoes of Revolution, and the Gratitude of the Republic. Ryan L. Cole is a former speechwriter and assistant to Indiana, I might add, Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels. He is a great leader and a spectacular governor. Are you friends with Governor Braun as well?
To reinforce how great Governor Daniels is, that he wrote all his own speeches. Every word that Governor Daniels ever said comes out of that's how unique he is. I just was there helping out with the research, but I concur with you on your analysis of Indiana's governor. I'm friends with Governor Pence as well. And Governor Holcomb. I just don't know Governor Braun, but hopefully I'll get to know him soon. Yeah,
Mike Pence and I are great friends from my time at the RNC, and wondering if you know another one of my Republican buddies from Indiana, James Bopp, an attorney who actually does a lot of work now for Governor Braun.
Yeah, I don't know him personally, but he has been recently appointed a trustee of Indiana University, which is an alum. So that's exciting.
No idea. They have no idea what they're getting themselves into.
I was going to say it's exciting news, perhaps for you and me, but less so for the faculty.
Okay, Ryan holds degrees in history and journalism from Indiana University. How about them? Who's your football team this year? Hey, Google their numbers. He's written extensively about American history and is the author of Light Horse Harry Lee, The Rise and Fall of a Revolutionary Hero. As I just said, his latest book, The Last Adieu, Triumphant Return, The Echoes of Revolution and the Gratitude of the Republic, was just released last month from HarperCollins imprint, Harper Horizon. Boy, what a great book you've written, and kind of such interesting things that you've brought up, because most people just they only know Lafayette, from the war, right? And Revolutionary War, and really don't know much about what happened to him later. So briefly tell our viewers what it was like writing and working for Governor Mitch Daniels first. Okay, I know you said a little about it. and also your book about Light Horse Harry Lee.
Okay. Well, Governor Daniels, like I said, writes every is unique amongst politicians that he writes everything. But I spent 4 years working for him, helping out with projects and research, and just getting a front row seat to see how you actually. I love this saying. What Governor Daniels' legacy is: making the change you'll never make. So many things during his 8 years as governor involved making incredible transformative changes in state government, how state government operated, that were, when he became governor, I think he was told, you can't do that. You can't put the state on daylight savings time. You can't make the BMV run. You can't get people in and out of there. It's still, if you come to Indiana and you go to the BMV, you'll be shocked by how quickly you're in and out of there. And that's because he took on all these kind of totally frozen in time type of institutions and refreshed them. And getting to be around that and being around how he thought was it was a great experience. It taught me a lot about politics. It taught me a lot about communication. And one of the great things that's relevant to what we're going to talk about is a great history fan. He taught a history course at Purdue. And when you weren't working on the projects, a lot of times you were talking about what he was reading and recommendations, what he thought you should read. And usually it was history books. So that's wonderful to work for someone who has that appreciation of history.
So tell us, Ryan, what drew you to Lafayette, and specifically, not necessarily the story about him and the Revolutionary War, but after the war and this trip, this tour of America they took. I think we were 24 states at the time. What drew you to the topic?
Well, I had read numerous biographies of Lafayette, so I didn't want to write another biography of Lafayette. I wanted to write, I guess, a biography of this year, of this event, this 13-month trip. And I had read about this tour of America in these other biographies. It's usually a chapter, or I'd read about it in other histories of the era, the Young Republic. Again, it was usually a chapter, and I wanted to know more. It was so interesting to me, the sense of spectacle, what an important event was to the country at this point. I wanted to know more. I want to know, how did he get here? What boat did he come on? What happened on the boat? What was the process? Who arranged the trip? How did they decide where he was going to go? And then the two things I think were most important were, I wanted to know what he was thinking and feeling as he was seeing the country that had changed so profoundly since he had been here 40 years before. And I wanted to know what the average American who happened to see him or shake his hand, how they were feeling and what they were thinking. So those as my goals I set out to try and capture.
So Lafayette was still a teen. We're not doing sort of a biography inspired interview here, Ryan, but Lafayette was still a teenager when he was inspired to go fight and support the American Revolution. I've watched a streaming series a year or so ago on Ben Franklin, and they sort of make Lafayette out as this fop, hanging out with a bunch of other foppy friends. What was his interest? How did he come to lead our armies in battle against the greatest army at that time in the history of the world?
Yeah, I've seen that series as well, and I concur with your assessment. He's like you alluded to, he's 19 years old when he came here, and so we don't want to do the whole biography, but he lost his father. I think he was 2 when he lost his father, who was killed at the Battle of Minden by British cannonball. So I think he early on had a desire to avenge his father and a hatred of the British, compounded with the fact that his advancements in the French army were almost entirely because of nepotism at this point, and he was in a peacetime army where there was an attempt to implement some merit-based promotion. So someone whose connections had helped him get a position didn't have much of a future in the French army, and by his own admission in his memoirs, said he was after glory and fame, martial fame. So this all takes place while the revolution is underway across the Atlantic. And like many other Europeans, he's drawn to the cause. He's given a promise of a major general commission of a major general by Silas Deane, the American envoy in Paris, and he signs up and he comes across the ocean. There's some scholarly debate on whether he came here for glory or whether it was because he fell in love with the cause. Either way, whether it was he fell in love with the cause before he left, or whether he fell in love with it once he got here, he fell in love with it. And he gets here immediately and he's writing home to his wife, Adrienne. This is the beauty of the country and simplicity of its people. While a lot of the other Frenchmen who came to America with him were sneering at these soldiers who were really just farmers, and this country will never amount to anything. The women are even unattractive. Lafayette embraced America, embraced the customs, and ingratiated himself with the army and with the American people. And that extends all the way to 1824, the story we're talking about.
So,
And one thing I left out, I'll get real quick. I left out the most important part. He had no battlefield experience, but he gets here and he grows into the role of major general. And I like to bookend it from Battle of Brandywine, where he's shot, to the Yorktown campaign, where he helps trap Cornwallis at the Chesapeake Bay, leading eventually to American independence. I was leaving out the two most important parts.
for a guy who really didn't have that type of battlefield experience, he managed to comport himself pretty admirably.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's his legacy too.
So the British are kicked out of America mostly. Lafayette returns to France. What was the reaction of his countrymen when he returned to France fighting for this new country on the other side of the Atlantic?
He comes back a hero. He's a hero when he gets back here. And there's a famous quote about Lafayette, which is much later. It's during the time period of the book we're about to talk about, where he's a monument in search of a pedestal. And I like to say, at the early years of the French Revolution, he finds this pedestal. He's one of the primary actors and stars of this drama as it plays out, leading the Parisian National Guard to keep order during the revolution. He drafts an unused Declaration of the Rights of Men. I think his involvement in the American Revolution gave him influence in the early years of the French Revolution, but then he falls off the pedestal, obviously, because he's suspected by the royals of being insufficiently loyal, and he's suspected by the radicals of being insufficiently loyal to the cause. So eventually it results in him fleeing France and being arrested in the Austrian Netherlands, which is today's Belgium, and spending 5 years in prison.
Again, something that I never heard before, and I read a little bit about Lafayette over the years. Can you explain why it took then 4 decades for Lafayette to return to America? Maybe talk about what he was doing in between the Revolutionary War and his return, but 4 decades, I mean, that's a long time.
Is a long time. Well, as soon as he gets out of prison in 1797, the first thing he's thinking about is coming to America, bringing his family to America and settling, hopefully on a farm in Virginia, somewhere near his adopted father, George Washington. But American politics have changed so much since the time he went into prison. France is at war with England. Washington steers a course of neutrality, which itself, we already have growing political factions between Democratic Republicans, the party of Jefferson, and Federalists. This just makes it even worse. The Jay Treaty, normalizing relations between England and the United States, inflames France. So Washington has to politely tell him that because of the political divisions in America at the time, he may not be welcomed so warmly. So it's best that he does not come back to America. So that's 1797. 2 years later, at the end of 1799, Washington's dead. Lafayette writes to Martha Washington. He can scarcely believe it, saying he was on the point of returning to America. He claims to be reunited with Washington, and he eventually relocates back to France, where he is for the period we're talking about after he's freed in 1797 to the beginning of the 1820s almost. He generally is out of public life, other than a brief period helping convince Napoleon to abdicate after the 100 Days and the defeat at Waterloo. He's able to recoup some of his properties, using his wife's one of his wife's inheritances. They establish a home at LaGrange, his farm, his version of Mount Vernon. But he spends most of the time Once Napoleon is gone and the Bourbons are back, he spends most of the time in private life until 1818, when he returns to politics and is elected to the Chamber of Deputies, which is the lower house of the French Parliament. So he's back in politics at about the time of that we're exploring right now. But this even ends up being, as I keep like to say, that on the eve of his departure for America, he was in a very low place, because after the liberals in the French Parliament made some gains working with the Bourbons, a lot of this is peeled back when more and more radicals and former revolutionaries like Lafayette are elected to the Chamber of Deputies, and the Bourbons say enough. And then Lafayette himself ends up, Albert Gallatin, who was Secretary of the Treasury for Jefferson and Madison, and who is minister to France for Monroe, and writes a letter when he gets back to America saying Lafayette was insufferable during his time there because he was involved with every conspiracy theory or every petty plot. So eventually Lafayette abandons electoral politics, the hope of reform in electoral politics. It is involved in conspiracies to overthrow the French government, which then very poor judgment politically leads to a backlash both from the government and the French people when they see the violent nature of these plots. And Lafayette himself was eventually swept out of office at the beginning of 1824.
So he had plenty of time on his hands.
The invitation from Congress and President Monroe arrives just when Lafayette isn't doing anything else.
It's sort of coincidental that President Monroe invites him to America. Monroe, the Monroe Doctrine, wanting to get away from European powers having influence in the northern or in the Western Hemisphere. And it's a curious fellow to have sent him or brought him to America. So when he leaves France to come here, is he seeking refuge, or is he seeking enlightenment in learning what's happened here in America in the 40 years?
It's such a great question. I don't think he's seeking refuge, because he says over and over again, and one of the reasons why there's a delay, you asked why it takes so long. There are many invitations coming in the 1820s from Monroe and other fellow veterans of the Revolution to come to America, where you will be safe, where you will be protected and loved. And Lafayette says over and over again, I can't leave, because to leave now is to cut and run in the battle for the rights of men with the Bourbons. And also there's revolutions across Southern Europe, and Portugal and Spain and Italy, that he's heavily invested in. So I think he's still committed. He's not going to move to America, though I think the Americans would love the idea. I think he's coming. He wants to have these emotional reunions with fellow veterans of the Revolution, or to meet the children of the ones who have passed. I think you hit it. You hit the nail on the head. He wants to come here, and he wants to see that representative government can work. He wants to collect the proof of that, and he wants to take it back to France to wield that against the Bourbons and against the monarchs of Europe. And an additional attraction, I think, is that very early on, his friends in America are saying, knowing his finances are a wreck, Jefferson says in a letter to Monroe, he says, I hope you don't expect Lafayette to come here just to have dinner. So I think there's some sense that the American government may provide for Lafayette in some way on the eve of his departure.
It seems that so many of the revolutionaries of our war and in France, their financial lives were a total wreck.
Yeah. The book I wrote before this was the story of the book.
Right.
Light Horse Harry Lee, Robert E. Lee's father, it was the national pastime, land speculation, and some were good, like Washington, and some were not so good, like Lee. But yeah, it's the numbers of our revolutionaries are brilliant men who ended up in debtor's prison at the end of their lives is staggering.
Right. So talk about the nation, America, that Lafayette found when he returned here, and his initial thoughts, and maybe how his travels through. Did he go to all 24 states at that time that were admitted in the Union, or were there any that he couldn't get to?
He went to all 24 of them, incredibly, 13 months, some of them more than once. He got here in August of 1824. His reaction was, I'd want to give you a little choreography. In the original plan, I think he was going to come to New York, land in New York, go up to Boston, back to New York, then start making his way west to Washington, which remember was not even was a
Right.
series of swamps
Right.
last time we'd been there.
Not exactly glorious.
Not glorious, and even when he gets there in 1824, it's not glorious. It's still it's a lot of work. It's a project, and he's going to pass through New Jersey and Philadelphia and Baltimore along the way. So one of my favorite to answer your question, he gets to New York, explosion of joy immediately. That travels to Boston on the way along Long Island Sound, going through Connecticut. So many people are following him on his way to Boston. There's a cloud of smoke in the or a cloud of dust in the air that apparently, if you got anywhere near it, you would choke, and you could see it for miles. That's how many people are following him as he makes his way to Boston. He gets to Boston and eventually comes back to New York. There's a giant party for him on the 14th of September at Castle Garden. The planners, their ambition was to make it the greatest party in the history of America.
Mm.
And then he goes up the Hudson. He sees West Point. He gets to Albany, and he comes back down. And he writes a letter once he gets back to New York, and he says, "You cannot believe the miracle made possible here by 40 some years of self government and instruction and liberty. It surpasses my imagination. I know." So I think he was coming here and he was thrilled by the growth of cities, the expansion of the population, the rise of industry. Now there were arts. Lafayette loves the theater. He's taking in the theater in multiple places, the circus in Louisville, of all places. So I think he's thrilled. And a lot of that is affirmation, right? It's self affirmation in the sense that
Sure.
I participated in this revolution, which is now bearing such incredible fruit.
Not all of what he saw he was impressed with, though, I presume. I mean, there still was plenty of the beginnings, of states' rights issues and so on here in this country. Lots of battles in the Congress as well. Talk about those things.
It's interesting. He's here during a very contentious presidential election in 1824, which is very strange for candidates one party presidential election. At this point, the Democrat and Republicans had held the presidency. Remember Jefferson, Madison, Monroe. The Federalists had really ceased to be a player at the presidential level and will be out of business by the end of the decade. So it was a very weird presidential election, which is in the aftermath of a financial crisis and then Missouri's entrance into the Union, which is a sectional crisis. So there's all these sectional economic tensions playing out. And some of the observers wondered if the Union could withstand it. And it's incredibly divisive. Remember, at this point in the country's history, there's 600 some newspapers, many partisan, whipping up the followers of each candidate: John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, William Crawford, and Henry Clay. And Lafayette arrives in the middle of this, and the country goes nuts. And I would say they paused the partisanship, didn't end, but I think they prioritized Lafayette and the memory of the revolution, which they rallied around. So the politics, I think that he stayed out of it purposely, and I think he was very, very tranquil about what was happening. Even when the election is thrown to the House of Representatives, when none of the candidates wins the requisite electoral votes, he's still very at peace and is saying presidency will pass from one generation, the revolutionary generation, to the next generation smoothly, and all the Europeans who are sneering at us, at the Americans, will be proven wrong. So he's generally pretty pleased with everything he sees. But the one thing that makes his heart sick is slavery in the southern states in particular, and what he describes very politely as the relationship between the races. So slavery, inequality, and racism are things that bother him. But you mentioned the 250th at the beginning of the show. I think this is a wonderful lesson to carry forward into the 250th, is that Lafayette is able to look at all the progress, be proud and happy, and essentially say, America is great. The American Revolution made the world better, and the world is better because of America. And he's also able to say to his American friends, there's still work to do.
Mm.
And I think he demonstrates this very, I would say, gently by meeting publicly with free black men, black veterans of the Revolution. In New Orleans, he meets with a battalion of free black men who helped defend the city in 1815 alongside Andrew Jackson. And in Ohio, he's quoted in a newspaper as saying, "You citizens of Gallipolis on the Ohio River are so lucky to live on this side of the river because slavery cannot breathe here." So I think he's making a point to his American friends. This experiment is succeeding beyond our wildest dreams, but keep going.
course, his own home country, France, was involved in slave trade as well at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lafayette, 1785, had bought a plantation, um, and two plantations to try, and he had this experiment to try and um, acquire slaves and then educate them and pay them and eventually free them. That had actually ended up, the whole thing had fallen apart during the revolution when all his property was seized. So yeah, this is something that had been a cause for him for a long time.
Mhm.
And so it's still a passion for him when he comes to America. But I think there's something about being able to say, unapologetically, that America is great. And also, we can also say that if there's still work to do, we can do it because the founders left us the tools to engage in that work. I feel that's the history of the country.
And it's still, as we know, it's an ongoing history. We're living through historic times in these days. Lots of change. I just think it's sort of ironic. You go back, over almost 200 years, and there was still the muckraking. There were still these political newspapers, if you will, periodicals that were out there. Um, I think there's many of my friends may disagree or hate that I said it this way. There's a lot of French influence in America in our psyche in terms of this revolutionary spirit and conspiracy theories and that sort of thing. That maybe through all of the griping about one another's countries for 2 centuries or so, we do share good and bad traits amongst us that are really very human. And those are the times. So how you mentioned, I mean, there's been so many different biographies and so on, but now you're writing this book about post-Revolutionary War, and really now 40 years later. How did you accomplish your research? Where did you get your stuff? How did you manage to kind of weave the story that you have? Because it's a cool story.
Well, thank you. I was fortunate, incredibly fortunate, because I began the project and then I realized the Lilly Library on the campus of Indiana University, was 2 miles from my house, maybe, if that, has one of the best collections of Lafayette materials in the country. And I only used a fraction of it because remember, I was focused on like 5 years, 1820 to 1825. And that was fantastic. There was a lot of letters that Lafayette, I was hunting for letters that Lafayette was writing home or to friends during his travels because you could get a sense of what he, I just was telling you about how thrilled he was by the progress. I was trying to pick up on those observations. That was great. But what actually ended up guiding the trajectory of my research and writing was when I was at you go to these libraries and you get there at 12 and you think that'll be enough time, and then it's 5 o'clock and you haven't barely got through the material in front of you. And I was one of these afternoons, I had a letter in front of me. I pulled out of a folder, and it was 4 or 5 pages long, and it was written by a woman I'd never even heard of. I didn't know the name, and it was written to another woman I'd never heard of. And I thought, maybe I better skip this and go find a letter Lafayette wrote. But then I thought, no, I better see what this is. And it was a letter written by a woman who lived in New York, who had gone to Manhattan and snuck into Lafayette's birthday party on September 6th, 1824, that the Society of Cincinnati was throwing for him. She'd snuck in. The guards saw her and said, "Get out." And then a man named Marinus Willett, who's a veteran of the Revolution, comes into the room and says, let the lady stay." And then Lafayette shows up and she gets to shake his hand. So in the letter, she's writing about all this. And so you're getting this incredibly vivid firsthand account of what he's like, what it's like to shake his hand. And then even better, after she writes all that, this is a letter to her own sister, she tells about what she's feeling. And she's saying the whole country's gone mad. We're all Lafayette mad right now.
Mm.
And then she says, if ever was an occasion to be mad, it's now. And I see this, I was so stunned by this because it so vividly and so eloquently expressed what was happening in the country. Much better, much more eloquently than I could capture it. So I then said, I need to find more of these letters, and I need to give these everyday Americans whose names are lost to history, I need to let them drive the narrative, because I think readers will really understand what's happening. And I then began a hunt for those in historical societies and libraries and museums, and they form a lot of the narrative of this book.
What was the most far-flung place that you had to go besides right there on the IU campus to find some of these things? Because, I mean, some of them probably were like little little notes that had managed to survive over the years. What was the most far-flung place or experience you had?
I don't know. That's a great question. Cornell is not far flung, but that's where the real the primary collection of Lafayette material is. And I was lucky enough to have a research assistant who lives in New York, but she went up there, I think 4 or 5 times. She was putting on so many miles, and that's where they have most of the letters that Lafayette wrote home to his daughters and granddaughters, but also he hired a private secretary to come with him on this trip, Auguste Levasseur, to help with letters and speeches. And then Lavasseur's journals of the travels were published after the trip, and that's like the primary source for understanding this. But we were able to see his letters that he wrote back to France during the trip, and they have a lot of material that's not in the published journal, and that was revelatory. There was things in there that were just so fantastic in terms of the description of what Lafayette was feeling and the way people were reacting to him. But I know I'm not quite answering your question, but the Maryland Historical Society, the history of the Chicago History Museum, every state where he visited, there was like one letter, maybe it was just one letter written by someone, or maybe there was a diary, an unpublished diary that was written years after Lafayette had visited, a memoir, an unpublished memoir. And so I hunted for these things for months, was trying to find them, and was lucky enough that a lot of them turned up. And they were able, I think, I know I said I wanted to write this book to understand how it happened, why it happened, what people were thinking and feeling. And those letters were the key to that.
Well, thanks for preserving that history. This is a really cool book. Hopefully, I got that the right way. Yep. And this is something I wish we had more time to talk with you about. We've kind of run up against our time today, but it's a good book. I encourage everybody to go out and get this book. Lafayette, Triumphant Return, The Echoes of Revolution and the Gratitude of Republic. Buy the book, friends. It's a good read. And look at the man Lafayette in America in the 1820s. Just one last final question, just a kind of a real quick thing. Has there ever been anybody since Lafayette whose impact was like what his was at that time?
I don't know how you're going to react to this, to answer this question, but it always resonates with people, because I've had people, when I tell the story, they say, "Oh, it's kind of like the Beatles, or it's like Elvis," and then I was like, there's a civic component to this, so it's different. But Taylor Swift's tour, that Eras tour, and the ability, it was like I was reading when that was happening, that the whole economies of places were being impacted by the number of people rushing in to buy, eat food. They're going to restaurants, or they're getting hotel rooms. Lafayette's trip, you could pay $500 to sit in a tree in Boston to watch him roll by in a carriage, right? There were so many people rushing into Philadelphia on the eve of his visit there that there was a bout of inflation. The prices of eggs and butter jumped. So it was like, in terms of a celebrity tour, which is kind of what this was, it's something along those lines. All the merchandise, you could buy Lafayette hats and boots and umbrellas and watch chains. There was even in Lexington, Kentucky, a tailor even invented a Lafayette jacket for men that was lint resistant. So there's this commercialization impact, but I want to draw a difference real quickly.
The power of free enterprise. We got to wrap.
Yeah, I just want to say something real quickly, is that the difference is, though, that this wasn't just a phenomenon of popular culture. This was a civic phenomenon, and I think people were expressing gratitude towards the revolutionary generation and patriotism and pride in their country when they were all losing their minds at the same time.
Thanks for joining us, Ryan. Great book. Go ahead and take a quick break. When we return back to our broadcast today, Janet Wittenbraker talks about issues with the city of Tucson and bringing safety and prosperity back to our city again. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Inside Track with Bruce Ash on the Live the Dream Media Network. Now a word from our sponsor.
It's termite season.
Hi, it's me.
And bugs fear the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control.
Go blue at Essential Pest Control. We'll eliminate those bugs, bees, and termites. And stop paying too much to that national provider. Buy local for great service and affordable rates. Call Essential Pest Control because termites fear the blue.
Run for your life!
Call for the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control. 886-3029. That's 886-3029. Or check online at essentialpest.com.
This is Eb Wilkinson with Wilkinson Wealth Management, where we manage money for gun owners. What does it mean to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired? It means designing a plan that allows you to do the things you want to do, outpace inflation, and never run out of money in your lifetime. If you want to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired, call me, Eb Wilkinson, at 777-1911. That's 777-1911 or WilkinsonWealthMGMT.com.
I'm proud to welcome my good friends at Tucson Iron and Metal Retail to Inside Track as an advertiser. Jamie Kipper and her staff are conservation experts. They sell round and square steel tubing, metal plate and roofing materials, as well as new and used steel, aluminum, and stainless steel to ranchers, artists, interior designers, roofers, as well as you do-it-yourselfers out there. Tucson Iron and Metal Retail is open Monday through Fridays, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 8 a.m. to noon. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail, 701 East 36th Street. Call 520-209-1576. That's 520-209-1576, or go to TucsonIronRetail.com. Come by and be sure to ask for Jamie. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail. This is what conservation and repurposing is all about.
Welcome back to Inside Track with Bruce Ash on the Live the Dream Media Network. Now back to our show.
Not return their bill.
All right. Welcome back to Inside Track. This portion of the show brought to you by Eb's great company, Wilkinson Wealth Management, who helps my family also. Let him help you. Wilkinson Wealth Management. Call Eb today. Well, not today. Monday. He's out of town for a couple days at 777-1911. Inside Track also brought to you by Essential Pest Control, Tucson Iron and Metal Retail, and my company, Paul Ash Commercial Retail, where we make things happen every day. Janet Wittenbraker is the Republican nominee for Tucson City Council. Janet is an accomplished businesswoman in her right and a political activist. She's no newcomer to politics, as we know. She's fought a lot of different races and issues, and she's joining us this morning to discuss some of the issues facing Tucson. Good to see you, Janet.
Good to see you, Bruce.
We're just talking about that insidious TUSD ballot where they make you sign your name outside of the envelope, and any malefactor in the world who gets an image of that can use your signature, and they can throw your ballot away if they don't think you live in the right neighborhood. Pretty amazing. So I'd like you just to start, take some time talking directly to voters and why they need to get their ballots off their butts today and elect you and Jay Tolkoff.
Right. So let me say to our voters, with all due respect, that those of you who failed to return your ballot in any given city election are by default electing the radical Democrats. And we've seen historically where voter turnout is roughly 24%. And that apathy, or that sense of I will never change anything, has in fact changed Tucson, and for the worse. As you know, we are suffering from a crime epidemic, a homelessness epidemic, failing infrastructure. And yet the city comes back time and time again wanting to add taxes, wanting to increase fees. And so we really, all you have to do, common sense individuals on either side of the line, on whether you be a Democrat or a Republican or an independent or whatever. All you have to do is vote and vote your conscience. And that will be the difference that turns this town around. Right now, our mayor and council is 100% Democrat. They often vote in lockstep. There is no discussion on the tough issues because they don't have to discuss them. If you elect me, J.L. Wittenbraker, and if you elect Jay Tolkoff, there's that diversity of thought. You have now, you find, you have a dialogue, and that dialogue will promote change because individuals will be on record for not only their vote,
Right.
but what they've said in those conversations. One, I think to myself, when you wake up tired, you know you're really tired, right? And I had one of those mornings this morning, and I think to myself, wow, I've been doing this for 3 years. And yes, I want to get elected because I believe I bring a common sense ideas. I will bring common sense ideas to our local politics. But the other thing, and I am a member at large with the GOP, as well as the third vice chair for elections with Pima County Republican Women's Club. And I firmly believe that we need to build a culture of voting. And we, the Republicans, we dropped the ball. And so with each election I've run in, I've engaged with people who had stopped voting. They vote, and then that culture is created. So we all, not only do you have to vote, you all have an obligation to get your sphere of influence to vote. Spread the word. This city election is incredibly important. City has a $2.4 billion budget.
It's doubled in 4 years.
Yes, sir. And yet they still have a $37 million
Deficit right now.
And they tell you, oh, well, we can't afford to fund public safety without increasing your taxes. That's malarkey. That's political posturing. And it's time to start holding them accountable. And the way you do that is your vote.
TPD could lose up to 170 officers to retire. The impact of that could be enormous on public safety because now we're in competition with all kinds of other cities who are actively recruiting the active officers we have today, much less those that are retiring. Talk about the Loop murder that occurred just recently, the Huckleberry Loop murder, that awful knifing that took place, and how the city really didn't want to talk about it for almost 2 weeks. And you know, it occurred on their side of the river. Okay, they claimed that had nothing to do with the city. That's the county's, you know, property. That's baloney. It may be controlled by the county in terms of operating that loop, but it's Tucson City property or jurisdiction, and they did nothing and acknowledged nothing until this mayor's stupid "make Tucson safe again" malarkey that she threw out there in the last few days. Talk about that.
Well, that is a mouthful there. So let's dissect it a little bit. So, unfortunately, an individual was murdered.
You bet.
On the loop.
Unfortunately.
And that area of the loop, which is between First and Stone, behind the Walmart, has been dangerous for years.
Long time.
The city's jurisdiction, the Tucson Police Department's jurisdiction, is in that area on the other side of the loop. Yes, the county manages the loop, but the city is responsible for the parks and many of the surrounding areas. They have failed to police it. I was actually accosted in that area on the loop. So unfortunately, a man was murdered. This has not been the first murder.
Or beatings and other things.
And what we're seeing on the loop, and frankly, the only way I'll ride the loop is if I'm with someone who is carrying. And it's funny because he'll take me on special tours on the loop. You see everything from drugs to loitering to motorized vehicles on the loop, and no one is doing anything to protect it. And then in the park, which is near my home, they're allowing the homeless to sleep in there. And these aren't the good guys. These aren't the down on the luck guys. These are the people who are openly using drugs in the park, and there is no police patrol of those parks. And I remember a time when perhaps, I stayed too late in the park and the cops would
That's right.
they'd come by, knock on that fogged up
there actually used to
window.
be park police in those
Yeah,
days.
yeah,
So Star Village,
yes.
this ghetto for the down and out. Talk about the lack of protection for neighbors. Talk about the danger to the community, drug use, blight. But talk about the lack of transparency from the city of Tucson, gaslighting people to say, "Oh well, we told you about this. And we did a survey, and everybody loves this idea and wants this thing to happen. Why are you so upset about it? This is an awful thing, isn't it? Would you have voted as a city council person for this type of a settlement cap?
Absolutely not. The city is trying to deal with their homelessness crisis, a crisis that they created.
They created, absolutely.
Absolutely, they created by taking the same approach. But now we don't have enough shelter, so instead we're going to stick you in a tent in a neighborhood that is surrounded by a park, surrounded by low-income housing, neighbor residential housing, and businesses. And everyone I've spoken with in those areas does not want it. We went to the meeting
Right.
that the city hosted, and their response was, well, we don't have to have your permission. We'll just do it. And that is true.
This is government by fiat. They decide what they're going to do, and to hell with whatever the people in the neighborhood have to say.
Correct. And although per the city charter, they can make these decisions, they can establish this policy, they don't care what individuals say in that area. And I'm going to tell you why. And this goes back to my opening statement, is because the people in Ward 3 in that area simply do not vote. And if you don't vote, they don't care what you have to say. You have to show them through your vote that you're not going to tolerate it anymore. And I want to go back, if you don't mind, to what you said about this new initiative, this new Safe City initiative.
A word salad is more what it was.
It's a word salad, and it goes against the city charter. And I'll tell you why.
Talk about that.
The city of Tucson is a strong city manager form of government. That means the city manager is responsible for running the various departments in the city. The chief of police is appointed by the city manager, albeit at the consent of the mayor and council. He is solely responsible for implementing these type of engagements within the structure of the police department. The mayor and council establish policy. The mayor's vote is equal to any one council member, and she has no veto authority. So the mayor does not have the authority to unilaterally apply a new structure to our police department. This is political posturing at best. It's more about CYA. They are now seeing that people have had it with the crime. They've had it with the homelessness. So they're going to pretend that they're taking care of it. And I guarantee until after the election is over.
And then they'll conveniently forget it and move on.
And they'll conveniently. And let's say, how can you say you're going to have a safer city within the next breath you say, by the way, if you have an outstanding warrant, come to our warrant quashing event and we'll just erase it from the books.
Unbelievable.
It's an oxymoron.
It's criminal is what it is.
It is criminal. And they do this every quarter. Every quarter. Just come on down and we'll waive your warrant. Well, you were issued a warrant for a reason, right? And I would even imagine that many of those are for traffic violations. Have you been on our roads? Tucson has the most dangerous roads in all of the United States. And we'll just waive that infraction. It's time to start holding people accountable. And I would love to have a chief of police that could do that. Now, I'm not applying any kind of criticism to Kazmar. What I'm saying is they don't have the adequate
When you're
budget.
when you're at half strength to what you had in 1988,
Yes.
you can't possibly enforce the laws and do what you need to do.
And they don't have the budget. So 17% of the budget went to public safety.
Right.
Public safety is fire, police, 911 services, and emergency services. So that's not 17% to the police department.
Right.
That's across public safety. What the city needs to do is they need to invest in a recruiter, the best recruiter in all of the United States, to start recruiting officers from Chicago, from Portland, Oregon, from California, and bringing them into our fold, and already established officers, bringing them into our community, and thereby saving the cost of a cadet, which is roughly $100,000 a cadet, and also not losing those cadets to attrition. So as Marana and Oro Valley and Sahuarita pluck out of our cadet pool, we need to go out and start recruiting graduates and bringing them into, and it will be expensive. That recruiter will be expensive. So will the relocation fees. I wouldn't suggest anything otherwise. So will their salaries. We need to raise our public safety salaries. A friend of mine, Lori, sent me a note the other day, something that police officers at the start are making about $30 an hour.
Right.
That's most, yeah. I'll tell you.
And they're paying retired cops $33 an hour to act as civilian advisors. They don't have to stand in front of a guy with a gun. They sit at a desk while the patrol officers are out there on the streets. Let me get to one more issue because I know we're on a tight schedule here. The city charter of Tucson says 3 jobs of government are public safety, roads, and parks. The city wants to buy Tucson Electric Power. Where does that fit in the 3 jobs of government here in the city of Tucson under the charter that they always defend all of their actions on?
It does not, and neither does any of their climate initiatives.
Right.
Neither actually, frankly, neither does half of their departments.
So if I want to direct this back to you because you're the one running for council. The city council members and the mayor have absolutely no discipline. Okay. Their goal is to embarrass President Trump. Their goal is to make all Republicans bad. Their goal is to obfuscate and stand up against lawful border enforcement officers. This is a radical kind of a government. I have noticed with you and Jay, you're sticking to public safety, roads, and parks. Public safety, roads, and parks. The other stuff is all wants and could be in a perfect world. Talk about that and what you would do to keeping to the goals, the 3 primary functions of the Tucson City Charter.
So, first of all, I would propose reevaluating the budget, the adopted budget, and focusing the majority of that budget on those services, public safety and roads. The reason I omit parks is because parks is funded through a proposition. Our renovations are funding these are funded by a proposition. So we could actually kind of put that a little bit on the back burner. We still need to fund them. But if you take it's like trying to fill a bathtub with a bucket that has 1,000 holes in the bottom. That's what the city's budget is. They're trying to give all this money to all these little things. They can't take care of any one thing.
Right.
So I say you focus your budget. This is basic finance, folks. I'm a contracts person. I'm not even a finance person.
They run the city council and the city government like an NGO.
Yes.
Trying to take care of little things everywhere and not solving the problems.
Correct. And if we just said, okay, the meat of this budget is going to staff our public safety, police, fire, and etc. And this chunk of the budget is going to fix our roads. Those will eventually become fully staffed. Yes, there will still be expenses with salaries and stuff. The roads will become repaired and there will be maintenance and stuff, but those costs are significantly less. So we can move on to some of the nice to haves. But right now, we really need to focus on those things, which is called out by the charter, but are incredibly broken here in Tucson.
Janet Wittenbraker, City Council nominee, Ward 3.
Ward 3.
You're running against Regina Ramirez Poolboy.
Yes.
Kevin Dull. What do you got to lose? I mean, Tucson, what do you got to lose? Are you satisfied with what is out there today? Are you thinking that this is a great place to live, or that you're trapped in a hellhole? Vote for Janet Wittenbraker is a vote for change and for progress. That ballot that's sitting on your bedstand or your coffee table or your dining table, pick the damn thing up. Fill in the little ovals on the ballot, and put these two great candidates on the ballot. Thanks very much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
We have to run all of our Inside Track podcasts are available on Live the Dream Media's Facebook page, YouTube, Instagram, and X. Thanks for joining us today on Inside Track, Janet. Until next Wednesday, when Eb and I both return with local activist Bill Sellers and the possible sale of TEP to the city of Tucson, and Chris King running for LD17 Senate. Until then, this is Bruce Ash and
J.L. Wittenbraker.
Be sure to vote for Janet and Jay and vote no on the TUSD override. Join Eb and I again in 167 hours.
You're listening to Inside Track with Bruce Ash on the Live the Dream Media Network. Now a word from our sponsor.
It's termite season.
Hi, it's me.
And bugs fear the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control.
Go blue at Essential Pest Control. We'll eliminate those bugs, bees, and termites. And stop paying too much to that national provider. Buy local for great service and affordable rates. Call Essential Pest Control because termites fear the blue.
Run for your life.
Call for the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control. 886-3029. That's 886-3029. Or check online at essentialpest.com.
This is Eb Wilkinson with Wilkinson Wealth Management, where we manage money for gun owners. What does it mean to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired? It means designing a plan that allows you to do the things you want to do, outpace inflation, and never run out of money in your lifetime. If you want to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired, call me, Eb Wilkinson, at 777-1911. That's 777-1911 or WilkinsonWealthMGMT.com.
I'm proud to welcome my good friends at Tucson Iron and Metal Retail to Inside Track as an advertiser. Jamie Kipper and her staff are conservation experts. They sell round and square steel tubing, metal plate and roofing materials, as well as new and used steel, aluminum, and stainless steel to ranchers, artists, interior designers, roofers, as well as you do-it-yourselfers out there. Tucson Iron and Metal Retail is open Monday through Fridays, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 8 a.m. to noon. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail, 701 East 36th Street. Call 520-209-1576. That's 520-209-1576, or go to TucsonIronRetail.com. Come by and be sure to ask for Jamie. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail. This is what conservation and repurposing